We are ready for lesson 2.5 and the second part of topic 2 here. We're moving away from some solving equations and we're going to focus on what we call proportional relationships. And so this should be a review from 7th grade. I've taken parts of your book and put it into Cornell format here. So I would highly suggest you get everything written down. There's only 2 slides. I know it looks like a lot here, but we're going to talk about how we can compare proportional relationships represented in different ways. So how do we do this? Well, we need to find, we need to find what we call the constant of proportionality. Okay, that constant, what it's changing by each time. Or we need to find what we call the unit rate. And sometimes they're the same. So, constant of proportionality and our unit rate here. Unit rate means per one. So, let's go ahead and when we look at the different ways, we have 3 different ways we're going to look at. We're going to look at comparing from a table, comparing from a graph, and comparing from an equation. So let's start with the table. First thing I want us to identify is that in our table, we're actually talking, this is out of example 1 in our book, but we're actually talking about this airplane, the Cessna 310. We're talking about time, which is actually our x value, and our distance is our y value. And so in order to find our constant of proportionality, also our unit rate here, given a table, we are always going to take our y divided by x. So from a table, we're going to take y over x. And what you will notice is that we've tried every single point. So in 5 minutes, we go 40 kilometers. We wrote that as a fraction. Remember, y is on the numerator, 40 divided by 5, and that does equal 8. And so what does that 8 mean? That 8 is 8 kilometers in 1 minute. It is a unit rate because it's per 1 minute. And you'll notice that we checked every single point to see if it was the same, to see if our constant was the same. We took our 120, our y divided by 15, and we got 8. We took our 240 divided by 30, and we got 8. We took our 360 divided by 45, and we got 8. And we did this for every single point to see that we do have a proportional relationship because all of our answers, all of our unit rates were the same. So whenever we're given a table and we want to find our constant of proportionality, we can take our y divided by our x to get that constant of proportionality. That's how we find it in a table. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide and see if we can talk about how we can find it if we have a graph or if we have an equation. It should be a review from last year. Again, we just have to be able to find our unit rate, find our constant proportionality, and we have 3 different ways of looking at it, from a table, from a graph, from an equation. And when we turn all of those into unit rates, then we can compare them. We'll do a lot of practice with this in class. So looking at our graph here, there's a couple of things that I want to talk about. Number 1, again here, we're talking time is on my x. Rental cost is my y value. And the most important thing that we know is that if we have a proportional relationship, I'm going to type this in. If we have a proportional relationship, our graph will go through the origin. And the origin is 0, 0. So it's 0, comma, 0. So if we have a proportional relationship here, which we do because we are going through the origin 0, 0. If we do not go through the origin, we do not have a proportional relationship. One very important thing to have written down. So now this looks different than our table because it's a graph. And we need to figure out what the constant of proportionality is or what the unit rate is. They gave you some points. Okay? So I would take those points. The first point that they gave me was 2, 50. And if I label it like I would label any ordered pair, the 2 represents the x, meaning the time, and the 50 represents the y. So to find my constant of proportionality, we can go back to what we learned in example 1. We take y over x. So if I take 50 divided by 2, my constant of proportionality here, my unit rate, is for $25, because that's what your y stands for, $25 for 1 hour. 50 divided by 2 is 25. So $25 for 1 hour. We could check this with our other ordered pair. We see that we have 3 and 75. We know our 3 stands for our x. The first number in your ordered pair is the x value. The 75 stands for your y value, which is the rental cost. So if we were to take 75 divided by 3, we do get 25, or you could think of it as 25 over 1. Remember, the top number here represents my y, so the 25 represents the cost in dollars, the 1 represents the hour here. That is your constant proportionality and your unit rate. They also showed it a little differently, where they just found if I move over 1 whole unit, so from 2 to 3 is 1 unit on my x, because we want our x to be 1, and I move up to that line, how far up am I moving? And they got 25 as well. So that is how we can look at it from a graph. Last, let's go ahead and talk about from an equation. So here is an example of an equation. Okay, and we have, it looks like C here would be cost, so we'll just maybe say T is over time. So if I have my equation here, what they're telling you to do is, remember, everything we've looked at is we want to look for that per 1 unit. So to find my constant of proportionality or my unit rate for the equation, we're just suggesting you put 1 in for the T. And if I put 1 in for my T, my C, or my cost here, is 28. So we could say that this unit rate is the $28 per 1, and I don't know what T stands for, we'll just say 1 unit. So all we did for the equation is probably my favorite, because all we had to do was plug in the number 1. Remember, per 1 unit. Unit rate is per 1. And that's what we're doing for all of these problems, are looking at, is we're changing the values and creating, or finding, I should say, not creating, finding the constant of proportionality. And how do we do that? By y divided by x, or finding out when our variable for x will be 1. So I know that seemed probably like a lot, maybe a little confusing.